Hey, what's up, everybody, and welcome to the Focus on Greatness podcast. I am your host, Hiram Roche, and I am always grateful for this greatness tribe and the community that we are building together, and the movements, things that we are pushing and doing together. I'm loving it and I'm enjoying this journey. We have been on, I would say, a journey together, walking through this together. We started on last month, in the month of May. We started a conversation talking about this concept of systems. And we talked about how everything in our lives, everything that we see has a system. It has a certain system of how it functions and how it moves and how it does what it does. But there is a system that we have within our own selves. And so the system that we are leaning into and talking about is this system of how we see ourselves. And so on last month, we dived in and talked about the system of thinking, the intro of this. And so what I want to do is I want to just kind of bring up, so just in case this is your first time listening to the podcast, first time being a part of this conversation, you can be able to understand where we are. And then I would recommend that you go back and listen to some of the other ones so that you can kind of be able to walk this journey along with us and be able to see the type of transformation in your life that I know that we will be able to see in ours. And so the first thing that I want to look at or remind us is, what is a system? And we have defined a system that is to be, excuse me, a system is a collection of interconnected parts that work together to achieve a common goal. Again, a system is a collection of interconnected parts that work together to achieve a common goal. So last month, again, we looked at our thinking, but now we want to be able to lean into, I would say, this next portion of our system, which is vitally important, which is our emotions. And so we want to be able to see, how does our emotions play a part in the system that we have in our lives when it comes to how we look at, how we think about when it comes to ourselves. And so this is what, through some studying and through some things, this is something that I was able to kind of recognize and see, that emotions can play a part in a system as they influence how people interact with the system and how they make decisions. So our emotions are is like that middleman. Again, we come from our thought process, then we go into our emotions. So how we think then helps us to regulate, in some sense, how we feel. And then we'll see how this back and forth thing. So this is one of the things I wrote down, so we can be able to make sure that we understand, how does this system of thinking and this system of our emotions, how do they play a part together? So the system of thinking and the system of emotions are connected in the brain through various neural pathways. Emotions can influence our thoughts, and our thoughts can influence our emotions. So it becomes this back and forth thing, through how we think about something, that then shapes our emotions or how we feel about something. And then it goes back and forth, where our emotions then can be able to say how we should think about something. So it's this back and forth piece. And so last month, or through these last couple episodes of this podcast, we leaned into the thought process and how we can be able to start challenging that. But now we have to deal with the emotional part of it, so we can be able to know how to be able to deal with this part, where these two pieces, major things of our thoughts and our emotions, are able to now start making a pivot, making a change in where we are going for the goal that we are trying to create and go in our lives. Which, again, one of the systems that we're looking at is how we look at and how we deal with in our own selves. So this is what I thought was going to be interesting, is that the first thing that I believe that we need to be able to start dealing with, specifically when it comes to the system of our emotions, the first thing that we have to be able to start looking at is, we have to start to silence this inner critic. Now, I know you're probably saying, "Now, wait a minute, what are you talking about, Hiram?" I don't want to say. Well, I will say, every person I believe has an inner critic, has this thing inside you that brings up certain conversations that other people cannot hear. We want to be able to lean in and talk about this inner critic that we have within ourselves, and we have to then start silencing this inner critic so that we can be able to listen to the positive conversations that we have about ourselves and be able to see ourselves a certain type of way. Again, we're still talking about the system of how we look at ourselves. So let's look at this. One of the ways, the entryway, I would say, of being able to start to silence our inner critic is we have to be able to deal with this negative self talk. I'm going to say it one more time. We have to deal with this negative self talk. I was having a conversation a couple weeks ago, or really a couple days ago, with an individual. And through this conversation, I mean, the person has so much knowledge, very wise, has so much in reference to skill. I mean, I mean, you can look and be able to see so many positives in this person's life, right? But while I'm listening to this conversation and I'm listening to them tell me different things about themselves, all I hear through the conversation is so much negative self-talk, so much negativity about who they are. So I want to be able to first start off by allowing us to understand what is negative self talk. So then we can be able to start realizing or seeing when we're having this self talk, negative self conversation about ourselves or to ourselves, right? So negative self talk is the voice inside your head that criticizes and belittles you. Now, I want you to hear this. It is the way we talk to ourselves in a negative or unrealistic way. Now, the reason why I wanted to start by defining this is because I know a lot of people know what negative self talk is. I know people think, or the people know what self talk is in general. But when you look at negative self talk, this is something, again, that nobody else is doing but you. This is what you are saying to you about you. So, for us to start the process in the entry of talking about the system of our emotions and leaning into this thought process of being able to silence this critic, this negative critic within us, we have to be able to start by dealing with this negative self talk, how you talk to yourself about yourself. How do you talk about you to you? Do you say things like, "I'll never be able to do this. I always mess up. I'll never be able to make that opportunity. I'll never have that." Like for myself, I remember having this negative self-talk about me. And the negative self-talk was, "Man, I shouldn't even be in this room. Like, I'm not even good enough." Here's a major word. "I'm not even good enough to be in this space." It's a negative self talk that does not help me. Let's be real. Negative self talk is not something that helps you along your journey. It's not something that helps you to see yourself in a positive light. It's not something that helps you feel like you can accomplish something great. It is not something that helps you feel like you can be able to overcome obstacles. No, negative self talk keeps you in a certain space where you feel like you will never be able to make it past that point. So we have to be able to start dealing with this negative self-talk. And a lot of how we're starting, we have to deal with this system is we have to start catching ourselves when we are having negative conversations to ourselves. So we have to be able to start looking at and working through the process when we're having these negative conversations to ourselves. Now, realize, understand that when you're having this self talk or this negative self talk, other people don't know that you're having that. The only thing that they're realizing or that they are seeing is that you're not having the results in these areas. You're not having the changes in these areas. You're not developing in these areas. You're not going after these goals. You're not making these things happen the way that you said that you wanted to. But what they don't realize is a lot of the reason why you cannot go after this goal, the reason why you are still stuck in the same place is because you've been having negative self talk that has now belittled your own self and has put you in a position and in a box where you can't go out of that box. So let's start with this context and let's break it down. How do I stop? How do I stop having negative self talk? One of the things that I believe that we can be able to start doing is I want you to start realizing what are your positive traits. Hear what I'm saying? What are your positive traits? Because negative self talk is only focusing on the things that you feel are weak traits within yourself. So, for example, you probably won't focus on if you can achieve or if you have the skill to do X, whatever that is, right? What you would focus on in this negative self-talk is the moment where you tried to do something and it didn't go the way you thought it should. And so then you put a blanket statement there and say, see, that's what I mean. I always mess up. I always do this. I always fail. I always do that. I always. And all the things that you're saying that you always do are based upon one small moment. I never get it right. I can never do that right. I can never have a good relationship. Why? Because you're focusing on these small traits, these small situations. But what you're not focusing on is the positives that you have, the positive self traits that you have in your life, the positive things that you accomplish, the strong areas of your life. Okay, you might struggle in whatever, that might be a struggle. And reality is some of the things that you're communicating about in reference to your negative self-talk, the things that you're saying that you never and you always and you shouldn't, and all these other negative connotations that you put on your own self, some of those things are not fully true. Now some might be, but some of it might not be fully true. But the way that we start dealing with this point or dealing with this piece is we have to start looking at positive traits or positive things that we can say about ourselves. What is your strength? What do you do great at? And some things that we feel like we're doing great at, or some things that we think that we're strong in, or certain things that we feel like we're good in, are sometimes things that we feel like are small or not big or not, worthy of even talking about. But some things that you do skillful, some things that you do great, some things that you do good, people struggle in accomplishing. You do great things naturally. So the question is, what do you do good? What are you strong in? What are you great in? Then I want you to start looking at, I want you to take a moment and to evaluate when you are having these conversations about yourself. Is it that this thing is true, or is it that this thing can change? So let's just say, for example, me being in the place that I'm in right now and this journey of, working on this new job, right? A lot of the experiences that I'm having And a lot of times when I'm recognizing that I'm having these negative self talks, or in spaces where I feel like I don't have the strength or the smarts or the skill or the whatever to be where I'm at, right? And so what I would do is I would sit in these rooms and, listen to these conversations or be a part of these moments or, those type of things. And then what would happen is I would walk away from that moment. And the first thing that would happen is as I'm walking to my car or after I get in my car, the first thing that would end up happening is I would start saying, man, I don't belong here. Man, I don't have that skill set. Man, I don't know why I'm doing this. Like, man, this is not gonna last long. Man, I'm just waiting for, man, you're gonna mess up, or man, you're not good enough, or, I start having these conversations. So now, because I'm recognizing that this is negative self talk, then what I start to have to do is I have to start forcing myself to be honest in that moment. Okay, you don't feel like you're good enough to be in the space. Okay, you don't feel like you are good enough leader to be here. So then let's ask the question, then why are you here? Have you led people before? So if you've led people before, then why in this space you feel like you're not good enough to lead people here? So the statement is not true. I'm not a good leader. That's not that statement is not true. What the statement is actually trying to reveal to me, or what my internal person is speaking to me, is my internal is revealing unto me a area where my emotions is saying I'm not strong, but what it's showing is this is an area where I need to work at. This is a space where I need to develop it. So instead of me belittling myself, let's read this again. What is negative self talk? Negative self talk is the voice inside your head that criticizes and belittles you. So instead of me allowing negative self talk to belittle me, make me feel already worse than what I was already feeling, I'm going to now force myself to look at this scenario or this conversation or this feeling that I'm feeling emotionally. I'm going to force myself now to look at this objectively and say, why am I actually feeling this way? Because negative self talk only comes based upon the emotion of how you feel based upon a situation. So the negative self-talk, you're not just walking around the house just talking negative about yourself. No. There's a moment that happens that make that conversation come about. So instead of me looking at those moments and saying, "Man, I can't do. Man, I'm not good enough. Man, I'll never be able to." Or, I always mess up. No, I'm going to now force myself to look objectively at the situation and then say to myself, what are you feeling and why are you feeling that way? And if I'm feeling like this for a reason, if the feeling that's coming up is because I truly believe is because your emotions is stating the fear of where we are. And if it's revealing the fear of where we are, then what it's also saying is this is a space right here that I need to work on. This is a space where I need to develop. This is a space where I need to focus in on. I need to lean into. So, what I want us to start doing is while we're looking at these moments, and when these moments come, because they do come, when situations happen and our emotions start to arise, and our emotions makes us feel. Brings this feeling, and the emotion in us starts to communicate and say, hey, listen, we ain't good enough to do this. Where is that coming from? That is coming from, one, the base of it is the fear of I'm not good enough, the fear of failure, the fear of the unknown, the fear of rejection, the fear of, we can go down the list of these different type of fears. So it's a fear-based conversation. It's a fear that we might not be able to, we don't know what this looks like. We've never been here before. This is the first time you've been in this environment. Maybe, maybe remember last time you were rejected in this moment. So your fear comes up, which then comes to a conversation that your emotions start to have within yourself. And it's telling you, or it's having this conversation saying, we can't never do this. But we're going to stop the conversation, and we're going to say, why are you feeling like this? Okay, you're afraid of this. You're afraid that if you walk into this space that you might not succeed. You might fail. That's a fear. So because you feel that you're inadequate in this moment, then take advantage of the feeling and say, that's what we're going to learn then. We're going to make sure that we got all the knowledge we need, all the knowledge we can get in this moment. We're going to make sure that we develop this skill. We're going to make sure that if I'm afraid to speak in front of people because I keep telling myself I'm not a good communicator, I can never be able to speak in front of an audience. I can never be able to make a proposal. I can never be able to do these things. Again, these are self-taught. This is not what you're saying to other people. But instead of me saying I can never do this because I'm the fear of failure, the fear that if I do it, I'm a fail, I'm going to take advantage of that moment, and I'm going to say, no, what I'm going to do is I'm going to learn how to strengthen that skill so that I can communicate to anybody. For example, now, if I say this, some people might be like, man, Hiram, you tripping. Which I mean, again, emotionally, I am tripping. Sometimes, because I am or have been, or yeah, I am, and naturally I'm an introvert. And so because I'm naturally an introvert, sometimes I have been afraid. Hear my statement, and I'm saying it correctly. I have been afraid to speak to people I don't know, right? And a lot of that fear is because of the fear of being rejected. So, what I would do is have this negative self talk and say, man, you'll never be able to do that. Like, you'll never be able to just walk outside, go walk to a random person and just have a conversation. You'll never be able to do that. You'll never be able to go somewhere and do an interview with somebody in the street that you've never met. And I actually want to do it. I'm, being honest with y'all, I have an idea. And again, this goes with our conversation. So I have an idea where I want to be able to go and do interviews with men in the streets. And I have certain questions that I want to be able to ask random men, right? But I'm terrified of doing it. Now, here's the crazy part. I bought the equipment to do it. I have the lapel mics that I can be the Bluetooth lapel mics that I can connect to my phone, and I can be able to do it. I know that I have the app that I've downloaded on my phone where I can just use my phone and my phone be the recorder, and I can have a great conversation. But why haven't I done it? The reason why I haven't done it is not because I don't have the opportunity. It's not even because I don't know how to talk. No, I have talked myself out of it because of negative self talk. I have belittled my own self. But again, the base of it is because of I'm afraid that if I go to someone that I do not know to have a conversation, they will reject me. So again, how do I combat this? One way, again, and I'm going to give us another one before we wrap this up, but one way of being able to combat this is I have to be able to, one, identify, is this the truth? No, it's not the truth. I know how to talk. I know how to communicate with people. I love people. I love talking to people. I love learning people's stories. I love all of those things. That's why I love doing what I do. So it's not that I cannot talk. So if it's not that I cannot speak, and it's not that people don't want to talk, because that's not the truth either, because people want to talk all day. People want to have conversations all day. So I'm what am I doing? I'm bringing this into a truth within myself. I'm canceling out the lie to be able to reveal what the truth is. So then the truth is, Hiram, you're just afraid to have the conversation. So because you are afraid to be able to do it, here's the piece. Because you are afraid to do it, now you have to strengthen that skill. Well, Hiram, how do you strengthen your skill? How do you strengthen that specific skill? You got to put yourself out there. You have to step outside of yourself and hush this silent killer, this silent communication that you're having with yourself. And what you have to do is put yourself out there. You have to strengthen that skill. The way that I strengthen this skill is I got to go out and start having conversation with people that I don't know. That's the only way you're going to do it. Now, here's another way of having or reversing the conversation is if I know that the conversation that I've been having within myself is, Hiram, you cannot. Hiram, you will never. Hiram, you always mess up. Hiram, you lock up and you freeze when you do. I'm telling you, these are conversations I have with me. Then now I have to change that, because now I want to change the conversation. I need to change it from a negative self-talk to a positive, encouraging, building up myself in these conversations. So now it's not that I cannot do. No, I have the strength and the skill to be able to talk to anybody. Who am I talking to though? I'm talking to me. I'm saying I'm doing this part on purpose because I need us to realize that this internal conversation, this inner critic that talks to you when nobody else is talking or when you are sitting in a crowded room, this inner critic that you are listening to within yourself that is limiting you from moving forward or changing or developing and growing the type of person that you're supposed to be. This specific person, the way that we're going to shut them down is one of the other ways is we're going to start having and transforming or flipping the conversation. So what I want you to do is I want you to write down write down. It don't even have to be a whole lot. Let's just do 5. Let's do 3. Let's do 3. 3 conversations or 3 statements that you want to say to yourself on a daily basis. Positive. You are strong. I can communicate with anybody. I am able to learn anything that is put in front of me. Just 3 things. I am strong. I can communicate with anybody. And I can be able to learn anything that is put in front of me. What does that do? That kills this silent critic that's been talking within me when my emotions arise. Now, is this going to be an overnight conversation, overnight transformation? No, it's not. Because why? You've been having this emotion, this internal conversation, you've been having it for a while. So this is not something that is going to transform overnight. But what you will start to see over time is you'll start to see how these conversations and how you're changing these conversations, how it starts to change what comes up in your emotions. Because again, remember we said, let me give you back this again, that our emotions can influence our thoughts, and our thoughts can influence our emotions. So what happens is when we start changing this negative thought or these negative self-talks, and we start having positive conversations, and we're now coming against that system that we have created within ourselves, what then we will start seeing is how the emotions and the thought process start to be able to move in a certain type of way where we think about ourselves differently, and we feel differently about who we are. This is just phase one. Dealing with this inner critic, we have to be able to stop listening to this negative self talk. We have to be able to stop listening to this negative self talk. I know that this conversation was very simplistic, and I wanted it to be, because when we start dealing with our emotions part, when we start dealing with this, it doesn't need to be more complicated than it already is in our lives. It needs to be very simplistic. You're as a man, you're already dealing with things emotionally. You're dealing with things emotionally that, based upon our culture and based upon our time, you can't even express half of it. I even dare to say almost 80% of the stuff you feel you can't even express without feeling like it might be misinterpreted, might be misunderstood, all those things. So reality is we have to make this conversation or these conversations as simple as possible so we can be able to know how to be able to start transitioning and shifting our emotions or the system in our emotions so that we can be able to get to the goal, get to the transformation, have the type of life experiences that we want for our lives. So, I want to wrap this up. That, remember, the way that we are able to silence this inner critic is to recognize this the negative self-talk, and start replacing it with positive self-talk. So you and I will be able to start realizing our true strengths, potential, and I'm going to break that word down a little bit later, but our true strength and potential, so that we can start being able to walk in the life and have the experiences and be the type of person that we want to have or want to be. That's better. The person that we want to be. All right. I love you all. So let's don't forget the three pieces that I positive conversations or positive statements that I want you to write about yourself. I gave you my three. You find three positive statements. They don't have to be complex, they don't have to be deep, but they need to be simple. Three positive statements that you can say over yourself on a daily. I love you all. And again, and as always, this is an honor to be able to be in these conversations that I know brings transformation. I love you. And I'll see you next time right here on the Focus on Greatness podcast. Talk to you later. Bye bye.